remember much more, but I know it happened quiet, so quiet.
Welcome to Lower the Shield, where we skillfully lower our shields together while listening and viewing artistic performances. I've worked as a psychotherapist, a psychological assistant, spent much of my life in law enforcement as a police officer. And there's other aspects of myself also that all come to this space, this moment in time, to bring out of me some of my experiences, some of my views on human suffering, but also on the humanity of what's present here on the platform, but also across the globe, maybe within the community. Bringing humanity to the YouTube through performances. I invite you to join me as today we start unpacking and maybe viewing, looking through a different lens of It Happened Quiet by Aurora.
Eyes blue and hollow as it rains against their will, feathers falling out of a pillow, as if time is standing still.
I've watched this video many times. It's been a couple of years since I was first exposed to it. So this isn't a raw surprise kind of a reaction. It's more of me leaning into it. Each time I do watch it and listen to her voice, I'm moved deeply by her performance. And it's the entirety of the performance. It's not just her voice. It's not simply the lyrics or the music. It's all of it brought together in a package. And this is one of the things that can affect many of us when we're watching and listening to some sort of a piece of art, an artistic performance, is we're moved deeply right into our heart, and we may feel deep emotions around something. So already in this bit, in fact, let's go back and go back to the beginning.
Eyes blue and hollow as it rains against their will, feathers falling out of a pillow, as if time is standing still.
These first several lines here in the song, when I hear them, they start bringing something up for me. Eyes blue and hollow, as if rain against their will. One of the things I learned as I was researching this particular song is it's part of an album by Aurora. And there's a song before it on the album called All Is Soft Inside. And the closing lines of that song before this one would start, if we were listening to the album straight through, is all that I've ever known is the universe is wild. That sets the stage for segueing into this particular piece. Through one of the lenses, deeply informed by my law enforcement experiences investigating things that humans do to other humans, including young people, is the vulnerability that Aurora starts to tease away right in the first couple lines. The music itself is already pulling us on. I'm not a musical expert, so I can't tell you about key and that sort of thing. But I certainly know it when I hear it and I feel it, that the key, the sounds in the music are pulling me in already. And then when she says those words, eyes blue and hollow, as it rains against their will, feathers falling out of the pillow, as if time is standing still. I get this image in my mind of having sat with so many different people as they tell their stories of not being able to speak. It's like time is frozen. It's as though there's nothing they can do to stop it. As it rains against their will, they may not want what's happening, what the stuff that life is bringing them. In other words, vulnerability. So for me, just the opening stanzas here is she may be describing, and there might be many other explanations. It might be something around love, interest in relationships, etc. But it can also be around trauma, childhood trauma. And if you've watched some of the other analyses that I've done here on the channel, you'll know that I speak a lot around through the trauma-informed lens for interpreting some of the lyrics and some of the performances. As young people, when we experience, or when we have experienced maybe our own life traumas, there was not only, in addition to the vulnerability, but then also a lack of control, an inability to control things. And the idea of time standing still is potentially a description of dissociation, of the ability to sense something and things become frozen. And then later on, if it gets wired into the body the way so much of our traumas can, it's like we're back in that same time frame. We're stuck. We haven't moved forward. It might be a year later, 10 years later, 30 or 40 or 50 years later. It's like time stands still. So let's go on.
And I can't remember much more, but I know it happened quiet, so quiet.
She's teasing out more layers of how it is that possibly whatever was going on through this character's view, the actor in this particular drama, is I can't remember much more. Another sign that dissociation potentially is checking in when we go through some really horrendous things sometimes, really uncomfortable things. We have a particularly very effective way of not being able to recall it. And it can be useful then as we move through life. And this is in essence what shields are for. We can put shields up. We can shield ourselves from having to re-experience maybe the pains and the suffering that we've gone through. And then she comments, but I know it happened quiet. So quiet. And what she does with her voice and the performance pulls us into this idea of quiet. Let's listen to that again.
Can't remember much more, but I know it happened quiet, so quiet. Words falling out through the window. All that remains is a silent call. Is the earth colored red as I land like a flower on the meadow? Oh, love is wild.
The words falling out through the window, all that remains is a silent call. Yeah, she uses her whole body in her performance. She does this in most of the performances I've seen from Aurora. And she reaches. It's like she's imagining the sounds, the words going out, and nobody hearing. What happens when we're experiencing something and we scream out and there's nobody there to hear it, or we're told not to speak it? This is a common thing that starts to happen in traumatic experiences, depending on what they may be. We may have seen a little bit of it in Violet's Tale by Wren, where part of that story is Violet stood silent. And while whatever was happening to her over there in that song was happening. Similarly here is that the silence, the calling out is not heard. Either it's not allowed to go out, windows are closed, or maybe told not to say anything about it. That's often the case with youngsters when they're somehow encountering some sort of adverse experiences. They're told not to talk about it, to stay quiet. And then questioning is the earth-colored red, the symbolism of what that might represent. This starts to send shivers down my body when I contemplate this, just based on stories that I've heard through investigations or from some other arenas of my life, of what the red might be representing. Could be something as representing threat, danger. Red in many scenarios is a sign of danger and threat. It could represent something else, maybe a little more graphic of what might have been going on or could be going on in somebody's experience. Remembering while we're listening to this that this is a performance. She has sung it in many different venues, but this particular one, I chose this one because of the facial expressions that we get to see up close through the camera, as how she uses her expressions to really send stuff out to us at a deeper level than what simply the words can do, or watching her on a stage from far away. Let's go on.
You fell apart like a stone can be broken into sand. Oh.
The look in her face right there as she's talking about how the stone can be broken into sand. It shifts from a softness to a harshness. So whatever she's conveying as she's reaching out, a stone can be broken into sand. And it's like she's imagining whatever happened is breaking that stone and allowing it to turn into sand, whether it's the stone of the hardness of the experience, or maybe referencing some other individual, some relationship that has been rock hard and like a stone. There might even be love wrapped around it. Moving into this section of the song, she talks about how love is wild, pulling from the end of the previous song where it talked about the universe is wild. Love can be wild. And what happens when somebody that we believe loves us, or that we do care about, that we love, does something that may hurt us? Happens very often within families and within other environments. And what comes along with that? So let's go on.
1,000 pieces spread across a crying land, and you can't remember that day, but you know it happened quiet, so quiet. Words falling out through the window. All that remains is a silent call. Is the earth colored red as I land like a flower Love is wild.
So I'm curious, I'm wondering out loud if possibly as I land like a flower on the meadow, and then renaming that love is wild, is that there might be an element of hope starting to poke its way up through maybe some sadness, some harshness, some wounds, some injuries. And maybe even acknowledging sometimes that there might be emotional risks involved in creating relationships. For whatever layers that we may go throughout our relationships in life, that if we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to take risks, to allow ourselves to love and be loved, that those relationships may be fraught with betrayals and pain also. So the wounds that we carry with us as we move through such relationships can be emotional, spiritual, psychological, and sometimes physical as well. But that vulnerability of allowing ourselves to move into a relationship, to be loved and to love, which are absolutely core to being human, we also expose ourselves then to being hurt. But there can be some hope with it that comes along with that.
Our dreams as stars as they seem. Our dreams as stars as they seem. Don't you speak over my voice. I will return from the shadows and I
So right here, her facial expressions, her body language transform significantly into this space of, it's almost as though through my lens that there's some empowerment that she's feeling, some retribution. She's reaching out to somebody. Don't speak over my voice. I will return from the shadows. I don't know if it's a threat, but it kind of does feel and sound to me like that there's a little bit of, hey, you hurt me before, but I've come through this. I've got some hope now, and I'm rising up, and I'm going to be empowered not to allow myself to be hurt this way again. So let's back up just a bit and go through this again. I'm just going to let it play all the way through to the end of the song.
as stars as they seem. Our dreams as stars as they seem. Don't you speak over my voice. I will return from the shadows and I bleed in your bed. Turn it red like the ground outside your window. Oh, love is wild. Love is wild. Love is wild.
So there we have it. As she brings us into the end, it's as though that she's been telling a complex story that's maybe fraught with emotional scars in captures the lingering impact of maybe some childhood experiences. But then also the struggle to begin to be able to articulate it and put some understanding to the experiences so that moving forward, as we do that, as we start to be able to articulate, put words to what we've been through and what we've experienced, we start to create meaning and we start to reclaim ourselves, the self-reclamation. To do this, we got to be able to tease through the shields that we put up. We got to be able to have an understanding, or it can be useful to tease out an understanding when to raise a shield, when to put up a wall, and when to lower them as we navigate future relationships. And if we stay walled off, we keep ourselves isolated and we'll never experience love, or we'll keep ourselves from being able to love others. But likewise, also being able to love ourselves. An important aspect through any healing model frequently is to be able to bring it inward also. And the shields, what are very, very metaphorical, of course, can keep us from even turning inward and loving ourselves. So this is a complex song. And hopefully I've been able to bring some light onto it a little bit to maybe add some new meaning to the song or not. But one of the things that I want to leave everybody with is that if this has brought up personal experiences and maybe it's starting to become overwhelming, to take care of yourself and maybe to reach out and speak with a therapist, a spiritual guide, a religious figure in your life, close family members that are safe, friends that are safe to talk to. Knowing that these experiences, as we go through songs like this, speak to the human experience. That obviously, if Aurora is singing about this, other people have experienced it also. And that itself can be useful as we heal through our memories of what we have gone through. A little side note, Aurora mentioned several times about not being able to remember, or the quietness of it. The name of the song is It Happened Quiet. The role of dissociation, depending on how old an individual is when they experience a hard thing, there may not be words to put to it. So as we move into our adult spaces, and we may carry some childhood experiences with us that maybe are traumatic when we recall them or when they show up, oftentimes they show up through the body. And there's a couple of literary references I'd like to leave you with. One is When the Body Keeps the Score, or The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. He's a well-known expert in the world of healing trauma. And then the second one is When the Body Says No by Gabor Maté, M-A-T-E. Both are talking about exploring about similar things, that when we experience hard things, traumatic events, they become embodied within the cellular structures of the body, within our neurology, all throughout our physiology. So oftentimes there's not words that we can put to it, but there is a bodily sensation and experiences and emotions. So the usefulness, whether it's through therapy or through some other practice, of being able to bring together in a whole integrated fashion the thoughts, the memories, the emotions, the body sensations, to make sense of them in the here and now. In how do we know what it is? Oh, this is, we can feel a sensation, and with practice, with skill, and oftentimes it does require working with a professional to learn the skills. But once we learn them, we can do them on our own, oftentimes, to be able to say, oh, I don't know what this sensation is from, but it's really familiar. It's so familiar that it seems like it's just part of me. We can do stuff with that. So being able to know that it's not hopeless, that there is hope, that we can put meaning to our experiences, and make new meaning. Each time we, with intention, with skillful intention, we recall something and allow it to move through us, we can adjust our meaning to it. That it'll be unique for each of any of us, any of you watching and listening to this, of how you create your own meaning around your own experiences. And that in itself can be useful to know that we don't lock our meaning in necessarily. We may have created meaning around something that happened a month ago, and then as we revisit it, world changes, the universe changes, or our experiences change, and we can adjust that meaning. And within doing that, we can find some positivity and continue to move down this path of opening to the ability to love and be loved, to be known and seen and understood. I've received several comments on some of the other videos that I've analyzed and made comments on, then it might be useful for me to do something similar to what I've just done with Aurora's song, It Happened Quiet, to Chinchilla's Little Girl Gone. I'm not quite sure where that'll take us. I've listened to it several times. I've watched a couple of different varieties of it. So that may be the next one. Invite you to make some comments down below if that would be useful, or if there's other songs and videos that maybe I've never seen and might be useful for us all to dive into them and look at them from maybe through a trauma-informed lens. I'm going to stop here. Be well until next time.